Hey guys, tonight we explore gentle punishments in ancient African kingdoms. Imagine yourself sitting under a sprawling baobab tree, the heat of the day fading, a cool breeze whispering through tall grasses. Nearby, children's laughter mingles with the hum of cicadas, and the scent of roasting millet wafts faintly on the air. Justice here feels less like a hammer smashing down and more like a soft hand guiding back to the path, subtle, peaceful, and surprisingly inventive. You probably won't survive the subtle charm of these old-time discipline methods without feeling a bit jealous of their calm approach. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Justice in many ancient African kingdoms was less about retribution and more about restoring harmony within the community. Unlike the harsh punishments we sometimes hear about from other parts of the world, public floggings or banishments that lasted years here, social order was maintained through subtle social nudges, conversations, and reparations. You trudge along dusty paths and find yourself in a village where disputes are settled not with chains or stocks, but with thoughtful words and shared responsibilities. Take, for instance, the Akan people of West Africa. Their system of justice relied heavily on dialogue and community consensus. When a person committed a wrongdoing, it wasn't just about punishing the offender, but about understanding the root cause and repairing relationships. The idea was to heal the social fabric, because everyone depended on one another in these tightly knit societies. Historians still argue whether this approach worked universally or if it sometimes allowed offenders to escape true accountability. But one thing is clear: the system's foundation was peaceful coexistence, not harsh penalty. You might smile to know that in some cases, those accused had to perform public apologies that were almost theatrical, standing before the community, explaining their mistakes in a way that acknowledged the hurt caused. This was no small feat. The power of such an apology soothed tensions and allowed everyone to move forward. It's a bit like ancient restorative justice before the term existed, except with more storytelling and fewer legal papers. Speaking of restorative justice, the reparations often came in surprising forms. Imagine being fined, not with coins, but with livestock, grain, or even a well-played musical performance. Yes, music as a currency of goodwill. How wonderfully human is that? If you think about it, this approach kept punishments gentle yet meaningful. Instead of a public shaming that bruised a person's dignity, the offender was encouraged to give back in a way that benefited the whole community. Oddly enough, some fines were paid by providing entertainment. Picture a fiddler summoned to perform at the chief's next feast as part of making amends for a minor offense. Not only did this bring joy back to the people, but it also allowed the offender to contribute positively. This quirky tidbit reminds you that justice didn't have to be dull or severe to be effective. So, as you picture this calm, community-based justice unfolding beneath the African sun, remember that it was not all sunshine and roses. Some disputes still led to mild corporal punishment or short periods of isolation. Yet, even these were designed with care, aiming to teach rather than to injure. Think of it as a parental timeout rather than a prison sentence. We'll dive deeper into those non-violent methods and the role of elders next. But for now, rest with the image of a justice system that feels more like a village gathering than a courtroom drama. Keep that calm in your mind as we move gently forward. You're now walking deeper into the heart of these ancient African kingdoms, where the notion of punishment takes on a surprisingly calm and thoughtful rhythm. Instead of loud, violent displays of power, non-violent corporal punishments were common, but not in the way you might imagine. These weren't harsh beatings designed to break spirits. Rather, they were mild, deliberate corrections meant to teach and gently steer someone back on course. Think of it like a firm but kind tap on the shoulder, reminding you you've wandered off the path. For example, among the Zulu people, minor offenses might be met with a light stroke of a stick or a symbolic scratch. Nothing designed to cause lasting harm, just enough to impress the seriousness of the matter on the person's mind. It's a bit like when your parents flicked your ear as a kid. More about the message than pain. Historians still argue whether such corporal measures were as effective as the more communal reparations. But the prevailing thought is that these methods were balanced with social pressures and public accountability to keep everyone in check. One fascinating aspect of discipline was the use of isolation, but not in cold, stark cells. Instead, solitary moments were opportunities for quiet reflection, often in nature. Imagine being guided to a small hut or a secluded spot near a river, encouraged to meditate or pray and think about your actions. This gentle form of timeout allowed the offender to reconnect with themselves and their community's values without the trauma we usually associate with isolation today. Ritual cleansing was another soothing element in punishment. Picture a softly flowing stream where offenders would be led to wash away their misdeeds, both literally and symbolically. The act of cleansing wasn't just hygiene, it was a ceremonial renewal. In kingdoms like Benin, this ritual purification helped restore honor and balance without harsh reprimand. You might almost hear the water's gentle splash and feel the calm it brought to troubled souls. Scholars debate how widespread and standardized these cleansing rituals were, but their existence reveals a profound spiritual understanding woven into justice. And here's a charming twist: some kingdoms incorporated animal symbolism in their rituals. Unlike the fierce lions or leopards you might expect, gentle creatures such as turtles or doves featured prominently. For instance, a turtle might symbolize patience and slow but sure correction, reminding the offender to take life's lessons at a calm pace. It's a bit like the ancient version of slow and steady wins the race. This use of soft animal imagery kept punishments grounded in nature's rhythms rather than human severity. Gender roles also shaped how punishments were handed down. Women and men often experienced discipline differently, with punishments tailored to societal expectations and duties. Women might face more community-based reparations or rituals connected to family honor, while men sometimes had duties to perform or symbolic physical corrections. The emphasis was rarely on humiliation, but rather on restoring one's role within the family or village. It's a fascinating reminder that justice was deeply interwoven with everyday life and relationships. Throughout all this, elders played a crucial role as informal judges and peacemakers. These respected figures wielded soft power through wisdom and storytelling rather than legal authority. Picture sitting with a circle of elders who listen patiently, gently guiding disputants toward understanding and compromise. Theirs was a justice steeped in tradition and empathy, where harsh punishments were last resorts. The respect they commanded often made formal penalties unnecessary. In many cases, music and dance acted as healing punishments. When offenses disturbed the harmony of the group, communal dancing and singing were prescribed as ways to restore balance. Imagine an evening gathering where the offender leads a dance or song that celebrates unity, subtly reminding everyone, including themselves, of shared values. This creative approach to justice may sound unusual, but it offered a joyful path to reconciliation that's hard to resist. Food and hospitality also featured in gentle punishments and reconciliation. Sharing meals could be part of making amends, with the offender preparing or hosting a feast as a gesture of goodwill. This tradition reinforced social bonds and reminded everyone that forgiveness often tastes better with a little millet porridge or roasted yam on the side. It's a comforting thought. Even discipline came with a side of hospitality. So far, we've wandered through calming rituals, mild corrections, and the wisdom of elders. Up next, we'll explore some of the lesser-known kingdoms' unique methods, full of surprises you won't find in your average history book. Now, you find yourself stepping into the quieter corners of history, where lesser-known African kingdoms practiced their own unique forms of gentle punishment. These places might not feature in your usual history lectures, but their approaches are just as fascinating and, in some ways, even more soothing. Take the kingdom of Dahomey, for example, located in what is now Benin. While known for its fierce warriors, their justice system included surprisingly mild forms of discipline. Instead of harsh penalties, they often used speech correction, where an offender was invited to a private conversation with a trusted elder or counselor. This calm dialogue allowed the person to understand the impact of their actions without public embarrassment or harsh punishment. It's a practice that feels refreshingly modern, almost like an ancient version of talking things out with a therapist. Similarly, the Tiv people of Nigeria had a custom where offenders would plant a tree as a form of restitution. Imagine the slow, peaceful act of digging into the earth, placing a sapling with care, and knowing that in nurturing it, you're nurturing the community's future as well. This form of living punishment was not only symbolic, but also practical, helping to maintain the environment while mending social bonds. Historians still debate how formalized these systems were across different regions. Some argue that these gentle punishments might have been idealized in oral traditions, while others believe they genuinely reflect the core values of these societies. Either way, the emphasis on healing and community cohesion stands out clearly. Another intriguing example comes from the Shona people of Zimbabwe, where the concept of Kugaranaka, living inheritance-linked punishment with legacy. Offenders were encouraged to reflect on how their actions might affect future generations. 8. Prompting self-correction, motivated by care rather than fear. Imagine carrying that weight of responsibility softly, like a quiet breeze reminding you of your place in a long chain of ancestors. Remember that calming image of ritual cleansing from earlier? In some of these smaller kingdoms, the rituals grew even more elaborate. For instance, in the kingdom of Baganda, symbolic baths involved herbal infusions thought to wash away not just physical impurities, but spiritual wrongs. Picture the fragrant steam rising gently, the soft murmur of chants, and the feeling of renewal flowing through the community as a whole. While these traditions may seem gentle by modern justice standards, they also came with an unmistakable seriousness. The community's peace was precious, and maintaining it required everyone's participation. Punishments, though mild, carried weight precisely because they emphasized respect, responsibility, and restoration. As you let these stories settle, you might wonder how much we've lost in our modern justice systems. The ancient African kingdoms remind us that punishment doesn't need to bruise or break to be meaningful. Sometimes, a quiet conversation, a shared meal, or planting a tree can restore balance far better than a prison cell to close. Historians still argue about the long-term fairness of these systems. Were offenders truly held accountable? Did gentle methods sometimes let serious wrongs slide? These debates continue, but the peaceful intentions behind the punishments are undeniable. It's a legacy of justice as a communal act wrapped in care, creativity, and gentle correction. And as you drift off tonight, imagine yourself in those warm African evenings, surrounded by stories, songs, and the slow wisdom of a justice that feels more like a soft lullaby than a stern lecture.